First, when you take a look at both of these QBs, who had the most impressive start so far in the preseason?
Well, to me, it was Shedeur. I didn't see any interceptions when he was out there. Didn't see anything like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think Dillon Gabriel did a bad job. I was impressed with the brother, but I'm going to go with Shedeur. You know, the pressure was on him. The spotlight was on him. He showed up out on the field. You know, he played.
Stephen A. Smith didn't just clap back at Dillon Gabriel. He straight up body slammed his whole reputation. The man didn't land in a debate. He walked into a cultural chokehold that made him second-guess every single mic he's ever talked into. The second Gabriel thought it was a smart move to come at Shedeur Sanders, he wrote himself into the wrong kind of headline. Gabriel didn't just slip. He marched straight into Stephen A.'s domain, and that's like wandering into the lion's den wearing a steak suit. You don't step in there unless you're ready to get scorched like cheap fireworks popping off in the back alley. This wasn't regular sports talk, it was a demolition show, and Dillon Gabriel was the busted ride getting crushed by Stephen A.'s wrecking ball of energy, charisma, and cold-blooded receipts. And the wild part? Gabriel, with his almost but not quite highlight reel career, had the nerve to throw shade at Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur, the same dude who's weathered more media chaos than Gabriel, has even bowl appearances.
The comparisons were emanating from the media more so than anybody else. And that's what I think, that's exactly who I think he was directing his comments towards. Having said that, Dillon Gabriel, respectfully, it was stupid. A very dumb comment to make. First of all, let me tell you something right now. In every walk of life, far beyond the parameters of a football field.
Suddenly became target practice for a quarterback still stuck, proving he's more than just a stat collector. Stephen A. Smith smelled weakness the second Dillon Gabriel opened his mouth, and he pounced like a shark on a paper cut. No warm-up, no hesitation. Stephen A. snatched that mic like it owed him money and sprinted 100 yards. Unloading a roast so vicious, the entire NCAA media world froze in place. It was like a schoolyard fight where everyone just drops what they're doing to watch somebody get torched. Here's the truth. Dillon Gabriel's legacy has always been the same. Decent, just decent. The kind of quarterback who can shred Tulsa under the Friday night lights, but when playoff-level pressure hits, he's a ghost. The man's game is like a Hulu subscription. Usable, sure, but nobody brags about it. And yet somehow, he thought he had the right to talk down on Shedeur Sanders?
Who produce get treated differently than those who don't. What he said echoes the mentality of all of America practically, and most certainly the world, as we see things being globalized more and more every day. It was a stupid, idiotic, immature comment, because clearly you were feeling the heat because a lot of people was talking about how Shedeur should be cute.
Shedeur, who's been thrown into more storms, faced more cameras, and taken on more pressure than Gabriel could handle in a lifetime, represents the future of a program that was drowning before he showed up. And Gabriel, with his middle-of-the-road resume, really thought he could check him? It was comedy gold. Stephen A. didn't just answer. He peeled Dillon's confidence layer by layer like a rotten onion until there was nothing left but embarrassment. And this is Stephen A.'s sweet spot. He lives for these moments. He wakes up praying somebody says something reckless so he can blast them with that verbal bazooka. Dillon Gabriel practically delivered him a Christmas present with a bow on it. A soft target whose so-called credibility collapsed the second Stephen A. reminded the world this guy's been hopping programs like a hitchhiker, thumbing rides on the side of the road.
Analysts would sit up here in comparison to Shedeur Sanders, who did no such thing, and say, hey, I thought he looked better. I thought, I got to give him the edge here. I thought it wasn't bad. A pick six and a fumble, and we can get over fumbles. Have you heard anybody say that? I know it's possible. Have you ever heard anybody say, we can get over?
Stephen A. didn't even have to bring up the fact that Dillon Gabriel's name has never sniffed real Heisman talk. He didn't need to, because the torching worked better without it. He simply exposed how laughable it was for Gabriel to throw stones at Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur isn't some journeyman quarterback hopping around trying to stay relevant. He's a franchise in the making, the kind of player teams build empires around. The beauty of Stephen A.'s demolition job is that he didn't just address Gabriel's words, he dismantled his entire image. Gabriel walks around with this underdog ready to shock the world energy, but the painful truth is, the world isn't even watching. That stings more than anything, and Stephen A. rubbed that reality right in his face.
We got Dillon Gabriel out here leaking, and this is a soap opera to the fullest. Even if Shedeur Sanders wasn't a superstar wherever he is, because he is certainly box office, even if he wasn't that, I still think Dillon Gabriel be like, oh, they drafted this dude behind me? I ain't gonna love this dude.
And when it came to defending Shedeur, Stephen A. was locked in, lethal with every word, because let's be real, Shedeur isn't just a quarterback, he's the son of Dillon Sanders. That means every snap, every throw, every single sideline look is judged under a 1,000-watt spotlight Gabriel has never and will never experience. Yet Shedeur has kept his cool, played with swagger, and delivered in moments that put life back into a program most people had already buried. So for Gabriel to fire shots, that was like some neighborhood kid trying to throw hands with Mike Tyson. It was doomed before it started. Stephen A. made sure the mismatch was crystal clear. Gabriel's attempt wasn't just weak, it was career suicidal in the media game.
Nah, why is it even on your mind, bro? Like, why is that thought to even say that it's on your mind? Because
I just gave you the context.
But said, you know the circus that is around you every day, though. Like, you're at practice every day. Like, that was dumb to say that, but because you know. You know when you say that, how it can be taken. You could say, yeah.
You think he meant Shedeur Sanders?
I don't think he meant it, but I think he should have chosen his words better. How about that?
But if he says I was talking about the media.
How about I think you just should have.
You don't poke at Deion's son when Deion has turned Colorado into must-watch primetime. All Stephen A. really did was remind us of the truth. Dillon Gabriel has always played with a chip on his shoulder, but only because the spotlight never wanted him in the first place. Dillon Gabriel's been around long enough to stack up numbers, but not long enough to stack up respect. And that's exactly why his jab at Shedeur was humiliating. Shedeur, even when he struggles, pulls headlines every single week. Gabriel, his biggest headline is packing his bags for yet another transfer, and Stephen A. ripped right into that soft spot with zero hesitation.
And seeing how the Browns react to this, how the locker room reacts to this, how Shedeur reacts to this, because it was a clear shot at Shedeur. But let's say Dillon Gabriel's talking about the media, how could you be a brand new quarterback in the NFL and the first time you get behind a mic after your first game, you throw the media under the bus? That's arrogant.
He dragged Gabriel's rep through the dirt like a quarterback who just threw a pick six at the buzzer. Stephen A. didn't even need to crank up the volume, but of course he did. It's what he does, and when he did, it was scorched earth. He painted Gabriel as the textbook example of a player who talks way louder than his resume. The way he tore Gabriel down while elevating Shedeur at the same time, pure art. That's why the takedown hit so viciously. It wasn't just an attack, it was a reality check. Because when you line it up, the truth is brutal. Gabriel's numbers, solid. His wins, respectable, against average defenses. But where's the legend? Where's the Heisman buzz that doesn't fizzle out by October?
Today on his 42nd
I want you to be meaner.
birthday. That's number one. Number two, after the game, the Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski said there was a mix-up in the routes and that players were in the areas that they shouldn't have been.
Look at Stephen A's face. Look at Stephen A's face. Look at his face.
Stephen A.
Oh my Lord. So that's what we.
Where's the signature playoff moment burned into history? Nowhere. His career highlight reel looks more like a serviceable commercial. He's basically the quarterback version of a mid-tier chain restaurant. It feeds you, sure, but nobody's bragging about eating there. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders is a brand, box office gold. He's the quarterback fans tune in to watch not just for the scoreboard, but for the drama, the spectacle, the energy. Gabriel trying to downplay him is like some indie flick trying to clown Marvel Studios. It doesn't sound smart, it just sounds salty. And Stephen A., he smelled that bitterness instantly and roasted it on live TV until there was nothing left but smoke. Stephen A. didn't just call out Dillon Gabriel, he cracked open the man's insecurities, his jealousy, and most of all, his blind spot.
All of it. I thought it was a clear shot at Shedeur due to the fact that his Oregon coach threw a shot at Coach Prime and Shedeur during their meeting at Colorado last year. But you know what? The cream rises to the top. Let's see what happens this week. I see a lot of the media talking about they think it was about the media and not about Shedeur.
Because if Gabriel really thought the sports world was going to nod their heads while he threw shade at Shedeur Sanders, he miscalculated on a historic level. Stephen A. didn't just destroy the argument, he dismantled the dude behind it piece by piece on national TV. Sure, Gabriel will still lace up the cleats, still give interviews, still have fans cheering from the stands, but from now on, every time he looks into a camera, there's gonna be that ghostly echo in the background. The sound of Stephen A. roasting him into dust for daring to take a shot at Shedeur Sanders. That kind of roast sticks. It's permanent. It doesn't fade. It follows you like a scar on your resume, whether you like it or not. Gabriel thought he was punching up, but instead he got smacked back down into that pile of QBs, forever remembered as good, but not great.
Still needs to thank me a little bit more for that restaurant I treated him and his family to, because it was big time, and stop embarrassing me by going places and trying to use coupons. That's how pathetic he is. The point is that yeah, a pick six and a fumble is usually considered a bad day at.
And here's the brutal truth Stephen A. exposed. Dillon Gabriel doesn't shift culture. He doesn't push the conversation. Because in this game, it's never just about numbers. It's about the story, the aura, the spotlight. And Gabriel's story, forgettable. Shedeur's story, unforgettable. Electric, primetime. That was the line in the sand Stephen A. drew with fire in his words. By the time he wrapped up, Gabriel's credibility looked shredded, like it had been fed through a wood chipper. This wasn't just a harsh roast, it was a career checkpoint, a warning shot to every other player thinking about stepping out of line to fire at Shedeur Sanders. Don't do it, because if you do, Stephen A. will be right there, waiting with that flamethrower, ready to make your name the next cautionary tale. And Dillon Gabriel just learned that lesson the hardest way possible.
See some of them step up and make some plays out here.
Ain't no way.
Gabriel
Ain't no way. He's not built like that. No way.
And this one is picked off and going back the other way.
Oh my God, why did he stop playing?
Now it's a foot race. And that is that.
They told me bust out my AP. Perfect timing. H-shot, we about to get legendary. Shedeur star the next game, baby. Shout out Dillon, though. You know what I'm saying? Bro, I love you, my heart. What am I bigger than cheese, bro? You know what I'm saying? But Shedeur got it.
But here's the thing. This stumble wasn't just about one reckless comment. It pulled the curtain back on the massive gap between quarterbacks who grind for relevance and quarterbacks who naturally own it. Gabriel has always been in the fight to be noticed category. Shedeur Sanders, he commands the spotlight whether he's chasing it or not. The man can dominate headlines for a whole week without even stepping on the field. That's the kind of energy Gabriel can't fake, and Stephen A. made sure everyone saw it. Stephen A. reminded the world that credibility in sports doesn't come from cheap shots. It comes from delivering when it counts. And that's where Gabriel's career falls flat. A collection of almost moments. Big stats in games that didn't shift the culture. Wins against teams everyone expected to lose anyway. And when the lights were the brightest, silence. Legacy moments never arrived. Now line that up with Shedeur Sanders. The guy who's walked straight into pressure cookers, knowing full well the fire was coming. Sometimes he dazzled, sometimes he stumbled, but he never backed down. That kind of courage is magnetic. It's what fans respect, what media feeds on, what makes you a brand. So when Gabriel took his little jab, it didn't land like a bombshell. It fizzled out like static on a broken radio. And that's why Stephen A.'s roast cut so deep. He didn't just call out Gabriel's words, he exposed the fuel behind them. Envy.
Cleveland Browns preseason game today is that the way that some white folks watched Shedeur Sanders last week is the way that some black folks were watching Dillon Gabriel today. And it's not Dillon Gabriel for Dillon Gabriel's sake. Most folks don't have a problem with Dillon Gabriel. It's what he represents, which is the disrespect of a black person for no other apparent reason than they are a confident black person, which makes the things that...
Because deep down, Dillon Gabriel knows what we all know. Shedeur Sanders gets attention without even trying, and he never will. Stephen A. painted Dillon Gabriel like the kid outside the hottest nightclub, yelling at the superstar walking in on a red carpet while the cameras flash. Shedeur Sanders is box office. He's the quarterback fans pay to see, the main event. Dillon Gabriel, he's the name you skim past on a depth chart and forget about by halftime. That's not cruelty, it's just cold reality. And when Stephen A. delivered that truth, it sliced so clean that Gabriel's whole image collapsed. Because once the mask slips and people see you as jealous and irrelevant, what's left? How do you sit in front of cameras again and expect anyone to believe the bravado? From now on, every word Gabriel spits comes stamped with an invisible warning label. This is the guy Stephen A. Smith roasted into oblivion for trying to shade Shedeur Sanders. And let's not skip over how reckless the timing was. Out of all the moments to come at Shedeur, this was the worst move imaginable. Gabriel exposed himself completely. Stephen A. called it what it was, plain and simple, a clout grab from someone starving for relevance. But Stephen A. didn't stop there. He dragged the irony into the spotlight too. Here's Dillon Gabriel, a quarterback who's bounced around programs more than once, suddenly trying to brand himself as the poster child for grit and toughness. The hypocrisy was so thick, it basically roasted itself. A guy who's lived off the luxury of hitting reset whenever things got rough really thought he had the standing to criticize Shedeur? Please! Shedeur Sanders stayed in the storm, took the punches, and kept pushing forward. And that's exactly why Gabriel's hypocrisy gave Stephen A. all the gasoline he needed to burn the whole argument down. Once Stephen A. framed it like that, Gabriel's so-called point didn't just look weak, it looked flat out laughable. And the ripple effect? Massive. Dillon Gabriel thought he was tossing out a small jab, something quick and forgettable. Instead, he built a stage for Stephen A. to drag him into the brightest spotlight he's ever had.
8 of his first 9 passes, threw a pick 6, bad decision, but was later credited with a fumble on a botched handoff. After the game, he made some very, very interesting comments. He said, there are entertainers and there are competitors, and my job is to compete. He tried to clarify later at the presser, saying he meant the media are the entertainers and a competitor, and he's a competitor, and he wasn't taking a shot at Shedeur.
And it wasn't flattering. This is how the sports world works. One sharp move can build your brand for years, but one sloppy, misguided shot, it can wreck your rep overnight. That's the reality Gabriel's living in now. His comment about Shedeur Sanders won't be remembered as bold or fearless. It'll be remembered as the trigger that let Stephen A. roast him into a walking cautionary tale. 10 years from now, people won't be talking about Dillon Gabriel's passing yards or touchdowns. They'll be laughing about the time he swung at Shedeur and got cooked on live TV by Stephen A. Smith. That's a legacy, sure, but not the one he wanted stamped next to his name. And here's the twist. This entire disaster actually lifts Shedeur Sanders higher. Because every time someone like Gabriel throws shade, it proves Shedeur's importance. Nobody wastes their breath on players who don't matter. The fact that Gabriel even dared to say his name?
Because Dillon started the game really well, and I was like, okay, he's balling a little bit. And of course, I mean, played college football for 42 years. He's the NCAA leader in touchdowns. Like, he should be able to ball a little bit. Then he threw a pick 6, and I was like, yeah, there's no way they would let Shedeur get away with that. So we're not going to let you either, my boy. And then he was being interviewed, and he said this.
Yeah, I think it's just part of it. You know, there's entertainment.
That's proof of Shedeur's cultural weight, and Stephen A. flipping that insult into free publicity turned what should have been a diss into a giant spotlight on Shedeur's impact. And that's the real kicker. Dillon Gabriel walked straight into a trap he set for himself. What he thought was going to be a flex turned into the exact opposite, a career-defining roast. Because once Stephen A. Smith finished with him, Gabriel wasn't the scrappy underdog anymore. He was the guy forever stamped as the quarterback who got humiliated for trying to shade Shedeur Sanders. That's the clip that'll follow him long after the pads come off. Think about it. Every NFL scout, every sports journalist, every fan scrolling through highlight reels is going to remember this moment. Not for Gabriel's words, but for Stephen A.'s fireworks. And that's the brutal part. Gabriel didn't just lose an argument, he lost narrative control. Once Stephen A. takes your name and spins it, that becomes the storyline, period. Meanwhile, Shedeur walks out of this looking untouchable. He didn't have to say a single word. Stephen A. went nuclear on his behalf, proving just how heavy Shedeur's presence is in the culture. The message was loud and clear. If you even think about taking a swing at him, you better be ready for the fallout, because the media machine is waiting to bury you.
I think he was taking a shot at Shedeur. Name the time you've ever heard someone say there are entertainers and there are competitors, and I'm here to compete.
Let's say he's taking a shot at Shedeur, right? At what point has he been an entertainer? He's a football player as well.
But we've heard people say that's what he's more interested in doing. Plus, we've heard this before.
Okay.
And sometimes it seeps out when you've been around people and they perceive other people as that.
At the end of the day, this wasn't just Stephen A. versus Dillon Gabriel. It was the perfect example of how clout games can backfire. Gabriel wanted relevance, and he got it, but not the kind he can brag about. Shedeur Sanders is still the headline, still the future, still the one commanding all the attention, while Gabriel's name just turned into a punchline on repeat. So if you learned anything from this saga, it's simple. You don't throw shade at primetime without getting burned. Showing the world that even Shedeur's critics can't help but acknowledge his presence, that's real power. Dillon Gabriel thought he was throwing a punch, but instead, he signed up to be the headline act at Stephen A.'s Roast Festival, and that's a stain he'll never wash off. The aftermath is cold. Gabriel goes back to practice, back to games, back to scratching for relevance, but now with the Shedeur W trailing him everywhere he goes. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders comes out of this storm stronger than ever. He didn't even need to open his mouth. Stephen A. handled the defense like a one-man wrecking crew. That kind of backing, you can't buy it, you can't fake it, and it sent a message to every quarterback watching. Keep Shedeur Sanders' name out your mouth, or risk becoming the next cautionary tale, like Dillon Gabriel. So if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. See you on the next one.